So here's one of the big weasels, isn't it? It's all a little bit weird. Now, I'm touching on the previous vlog where you probably feel like you are weirded out, where you're in a city or a location where there are tight-fitting black t-shirt guys with slim-fit jeans prowling around, approaching the female population of the world as they're innocently going about their normal day-to-day and predating on them and taking them back to their cave, or I don't know, their rather grotty little Airbnb apartment, and getting up to all sorts of scandalous, salacious conduct. So here's the thing. Yes, it is a bit weird when you think about it. What sort of normal guy, goes around, actually, sets sort of a program, goes out on sessions like he's going to the gym, has sort of targets of numbers of girls he's going to approach, like it's sort of like a game shoot, and he's trying to get collecting trophies, shares his conquests with the other members of the secret society. It's also quite possibly a bit weird when you think about zooming out to the broader context. I've got a friend who told me last week that a day gamer called Johnny Berber committed suicide. He was quite touching about it, actually. I've never met Johnny Berber. I did see a couple of the videos years ago now. I think one of him in Green Park in London, and he seemed, kind of a friendly, cheerful guy. And my friend who told me that he committed suicide actually bumped into him by chance in the middle of London. It was one of those really interesting, sweet, beautiful moments that only guys who, pound the pavements looking for a girl in their lives have. It's kind of like when you step through the looking glass, Alice in Wonderland going down the rabbit hole. When you step, I prefer the analogy of Alice through the looking glass to rabbit holes with this stuff, because it's just a beautiful paradise of the present. Everybody, when you look around you, and you notice this when you day game. One of the most sort of arresting things that I remember when I first started doing this stuff was everyone else is charging around, full of their own preoccupations, their own kind of small world, their simple need to get from A to B to buy something, and anybody else is in the way as an obstacle to be yelled at or got frustrated with or whatever. And then everyone's full of their worldly woes. But the day gamer is someone who, when it's working, is sort of like just beautifully eternally present. That's what I loved about Tom Torero, was it felt like he was present, and why it was so surprising when he committed suicide to me. Anyway, to go back to Johnny Berber, it's like the good die young, don't they? It's the good ones who go. My friend bumped into him in central London, and he was just sitting on a park bench, and my friend was sitting next to him, and Johnny Berber looked round at my friend, and he just broke into a smile. And I thought that was kind of like, says it all, doesn't it? That encapsulates this ability, the amazing kind of fringe benefits, which aren't really fringe at all, when you do learn how to engage in conversations with strangers, attractive strangers, in the street. But it's not just the attractive strangers, is it? Because you have to learn to engage with everybody. When you approach a girl, you come away and suddenly you're full of light and life when it comes to talking to, I'm just referencing, a girl at Cafe Nero who's serving me coffee. So it's such a paradox because, losing Johnny Berber, losing Tom, it makes you again worry that it's not just weird because it's a bit weird, mass approaching or whatever it might be, but it's also kind of like quite a dangerous rabbit hole to go down. I speak from kind of some experience of having met a lot of the guys who are in this lifestyle business, and that's absolutely right. It's not just a bit weird for the students who are doing it, but it's also a bit weird in terms of the effects that it has on those guys who teach it. They're sold with the kind of the beautiful dream of the eternal Casanova, the carpet bagging, globe trotting maverick who can hang his hat anywhere and have a romantic liaison with a girl in some far off Russian city. There's a magical romance about it, actually, which I think is certainly what appealed to someone like Tom. Although, of course, there's also the reality of it, the shoestring side of it, isn't there? So I think that there's this dangerous rabbit hole, this allure that is also dangerous. Is it weird? I'm not sure it's necessarily weird. It's a maverick lifestyle, being a lone wolf, but it certainly is, potentially dangerous. Now here's the interesting thing, both those two examples, the kind of when you get weirded out seeing a guy mechanically approaching girls and paying her compliments and then looking as if they're weirded out, or whether you're looking at the other extreme of someone who's really phenomenally good at chatting with girls, but ends up in a dark place. Whichever way you're looking at it, I think possibly the central, probably, certainly I've held this belief, and it's become, I've had more conviction in this belief in the last few years as I've watched others. The problem is, whether you're a student or a coach, you've got no real end game if you make it a kind of a single long-term focus of your life, and you become, you dive into it with an evangelical zeal. Now, for a lot of pursuits in life, you kind of got an end game, unless perhaps you're a footballer, in which case you open a pub when you hit your 30s or your 40s, or, well, in all seriousness, you become a coach, or you can become a manager, and so on. But there aren't many careers where there's kind of a limited shelf life in terms of that particular pursuit. I think the problem is a lot of guys getting into this stuff don't really have a plan, particularly if they're young and haven't got the experience and the wisdom that comes with years, without thinking how they're going to get out of it. And if you're not careful, you can spend 5, 7, 10 years of your life going into this stuff, and then you pop out and you're like, you feel like you're now an alien from another planet, and you find it incredibly difficult to integrate back into real life. Now, you might like that kind of romantic vision of being a lone wolf. It's sort of like a cowboy, isn't it? It's like a western. It's like a Clint Eastwood thing. But that's fiction, my friend. That's fantasy. That's storytelling. And the reality is not a Hollywood movie, sadly. So that, I think, is a central problem. And the problem with guys is that we're particularly good at, particularly talented and ambitious people, once we've set our sights on something, going through with it right into the bitter end and never knowing when to stop. you know, some coaches, they spin off and become sort of lifestyle-like businesses and so on and so forth. I'm not sure they ever really do stop. And that's why I think really, if one, you know, analyses this issue, the central problem that makes it seem so weird, or the reason it's perceived as weird, is that guys make it a all-consuming obsession. Yeah, they think about it night and day. They watch vlogs about it night and day. They become part of a clique who, whenever they meet for coffee or a drink, the topic is always about girls and chasing girls. They read books about it. They might not even do it much. And they then alienate themselves, and then they get into the whole manosphere stuff about how the West is going to hell in a handcart. They can't do anything other than talk about the wokey ways of the West. They don't just watch videos about how to pick up girls. They now are watching videos about how Western civilization is going through a process of disintegration, and they talk about how children are taught to choose their own sex, and basically they start grinding an axe, yeah, and they identify themselves with the kind of this idea, this kind of self-image, them and us. And whatever merit there might be in the arguments about the West going to hell in a handcart, quite frankly, over the millennia, civilizations have risen and fallen, and you can chart these periods and these phases in the evolution of any civilization. Just become a little bit of an historian for a moment. Study the ancient Greek world. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating how similar it was to Europe. Read Thucydides, yeah? History of the Peloponnesian War, for example. Learn from that book how plus ça change, my friend. It's as old as the hills. It's just a phase and a fashion and a fad that will come and it will go. So don't start getting attached and wrapped up with it. And I'll tell you why, because it will impede your ability to keep that sort of light, charm, boyishness, buoyancy, enthusiasm, which Tom epitomised. And he was always against, getting too much into the whole world of it. For him, it was about, learning skills, acquiring skills in order to get girls. So I think, that's a problem, and it's the same problem whether you're a student or whether you're a coach, is that you lose a sense of balance and proportion about this stuff. But by the same token, and it's quite interesting actually, because guys often say that they wish they'd got into this stuff when they were younger. I'm kind of glad that I didn't get into it when I was younger, because if I'd really got into it when I was younger, God knows where I might be. I might not have developed other interests. I might not have developed my own career, my career as a lawyer, as a writer. And I might not have had the wisdom and the experience that comes with years to know that you need to put the whole thing into some sort of sense of perspective. Now, that being said, having put the argument for the prosecution, my lad, why it's weird and the dangers around doing it, whatever it is, let's just look at the flip side here. I have just come out to do a vlog and have a coffee here at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, yeah? As I was walking through the tunnels, through the train station to come here, I saw a girl walking slowly with a small carry-on suitcase, attractive, and I hesitated because there's always hard work, and I haven't made any approaches for a while. It's always hard work, but I just did this, and I dragged myself over, ran over, and I stopped her. We had a great conversation, and I got a telephone number. I've come away from that conversation and experience absolutely floating on air. I've got all sorts of inner demons and troubles and doubts that bubble up during the course of the day. You know how the day has a certain momentum, and you get caught up in things, and you get angry about this, that, and the other, or someone rubs you up the wrong way. All of that vanished during the conversation with the girl. And when I came to the coffee shop, I just feel like a bit of a Superman, socially. Superman. Could talk to anybody, chit-chat with the waitresses at the coffee shop. I mean, it's almost like a spiritual experience. I'm someone who meditates. I've been meditating for 25 years, 30 years actually, twice a day, usually for 30 minutes. And it is incredibly powerful in helping you to let go of the mental turmoil, the troubles, as well as the excitements. When you get overexcited about something and you lose perspective, you get big-headed or whatever it might be. The turbulence of being a human being on this planet, thinking and feeling and being afflicted with all sorts of, bows and arrows of outrageous fortune, and there's just one single day is kind of such a roller coaster, isn't it? Meditation helps you to let that go, and sometimes smile and laugh about it. The end of half an hour. But in a way, it's not enough, because meditation is not engaging in the world. It's going backstage and getting refreshed. With Daygame, with daytime approach, whatever you want to call it, it's active. It's manly. It's bold. It's really hard. It requires balls. And when you go through it, and the magic happens, it can be quite transformative in terms of your inner emotional state. Yeah. So that alone is a really good reason for doing it. But of course the problem is that guys go on doing it, they become mechanical, they become jaded, they don't reflect on it, and most of all, as I've said, they don't have a sense of proportion about it and balance about it. And critically, they don't integrate it into their daily life. That's the problem, my friend. That they're still going out 5, 7, 10 years after they've learnt this stuff, en masse, 3 days a week, approaching 10 girls, and then going, I don't know what's going wrong, Well, the fact is that there's opportunity cost for spending that much time within 5, 7, 10 years. And it's in danger of putting you in having transformed you initially. What was a nectar, a godly nectar, a honey, becomes a bitter poison. It's actually observable in a lot of areas of life. It's where that sort of single-minded obsessiveness kicks in, where you've got like a dog with a bone and you won't let it go. What can initially be medicine can actually ultimately become poison. And I think there's some real kind of truth in that. So it's the balance that's important, and the balance here is you've got to go out and embrace the weirdness and own it. It's only weird because it's socially unacceptable. Quite frankly, online dating and Tinder is far more weirder. I mean, let's say you teleported yourself back 100 years, and you met a guy in the street and you say, oh yeah, how do you meet girls? Oh, I get on this electronic gadget, I plug myself in, I send these little messages to a girl in another part of the city. I take photographs of myself and I put them onto this gadget here. I mean, you've already lost the guy. It's like, well, what about that girl who just walked by or got out of a carriage or walked into the ball? Why don't you go up and say, hello, you beautiful creature, you. I couldn't help see you step lightly from the carriage steps. It's such a graceful and delightful manner. You've clearly been to the finest Swiss finishing schools that Switzerland can provide. Forgive me. Oh, kind sir, that's a very sweet compliment. Would madam like to take my hand and we could get a cup of tea together? Maybe take the baths later. You know, he'd think you were fucking weird. And this is the point. It's just like so many of these things in life. They're just fashions and fads. Yeah? The most natural thing in the world. The most natural way of meeting a girl in the world is by opening up a conversation with her. I mean, everybody's a bluff. You know, sometimes girls say, I don't want to give you your number because I don't know you. It's like, well, how on earth does a man meet a woman unless at some point he doesn't know her and he steps through the not knowing her into actually knowing her? It's just obviously a frame test when a girl says that. But, you know, this is the most natural thing in the world. It's just sort of socially conditioned out of you to think it's a bit weird. But as I say, it can become weird, like anything can become weird. I mean, there's this joke about this guy who goes to a psychiatrist and he says, Doctor, I've got this terrible problem and everyone's told me I'm a lunatic. And my friends have turned their backs on me. My wife's virtually walked out on me. Everybody thinks I'm mad. And the psychiatrist says, okay, why do they think you are mad? And the guy says, I have a love of Eccles cakes. Eccles cakes. You don't have to have Eccles cakes. You could have, I don't know, muffins instead. Anyway, an Eccles cake. It's a northern pastry. And the psychiatrist sort of raises an eyebrow in slight surprise and says, oh, how very curious. I don't see why a man should be considered mentally unhinged simply because he has a liking for Eccles cakes. In fact, I'm rather partial to an Eccles cake myself. At which point the guy says, really? You must come round for tea sometime. I've got 15 wardrobes full. So there you see it. It's not that anything's good or bad, it's when you become, it's the attitude that you have towards it, the attachment or the obsession that might develop because of it. That's where the problem is, and that is why endgame, the idea of what's the endgame, is a very important question for guys to ask. And they must ask themselves and reflect as they're going on this journey, you know, you constantly kind of have to reinvent yourself. I mean, I'm doing a lot of, or some, Tinder. As you know, I subcontracted out to my Ukrainian friend, who's brilliant, by the way. I was showing some guys, if I can digress again, I was showing my buddies whom I play squash with on Saturday night some of the messages I've not really shown anybody before that Anna writes, and they were absolutely bowled over. They said, what a great idea. And some of the messages are just so complimentary. They're like no guy on Tinder would ever send a message that Anna sends. And yet she's, you know, an attractive Ukrainian in her 20s, and she's learned, she's quite quick, you know, she's figured out how to text girls, and she swipes and she sends the initial message, which saves me a massive headache. It's just soul-destroying swiping, isn't it, on Tinder? But my point was that I've done a lot of day game, I've got the skill down, And you know, and now I'm thinking actually there's some merit in Tinder. Now I wouldn't start with Tinder, but now that I've got kind of confidence that comes through Daygame skills, that translates to dating, because obviously it's all very well learning how to Tinder properly, but you've got to meet a girl on a date, and you know, a daygamer is going to be far better at that than someone who hasn't learned Daygame. That's a conclusion that me and John Matrix came to a couple of weeks ago. So you can't, you know, you might reinvent yourself and try some Tinder, yeah. And like during lockdown, that's when I started using Tinder. So you've got to be kind of reflecting and reinventing. And there was a point for me when it became impossible to just go out in sessions. I tried, unless I was coaching, or maybe if it was going on a trip overseas for a holiday. But otherwise, it just became like viscerally impossible to go out and do sessions. It just felt weird. What was at first the medicine that I needed to take, I needed to go out and enjoy it and be enthusiastic about it, later on became a little bit of a poison. And I guess I didn't just, like some guys might, stubbornly persist. I stepped back and reviewed and reflected, and I realized that you have to integrate this stuff into your life, and then it becomes the most supreme superpower that a man can have in the dating arena. Plus, just having to socially engage with the world is just such a great tonic for the troubles of life. Yeah. Now, there are two other things. I mean, just to summarize, once you've been through your rite of passage, you have to then learn to integrate it into your daily life. Yeah. And this is why an older dude is well placed to get into this stuff, you know, because he has the life experience, and he already has other things happening in his life, a career, other pursuits, other interests. So he naturally has a sense of balance and perspective when he embarks on the adventure, and he knows about starting an enterprise and how, you know, important it is to not just be a flash in the pan, for example, not to get carried away with initial success, but to play a longer game, etc., etc. So an older dude is well positioned to embark upon this adventure, in my view. So yeah, you know, and he has got perhaps a little bit more money, better established. I mean, this is my evening coffee shop drawing room tonight, at least. And I've, you know, located myself in a way, and I walk to work, and I'm around people, and I enjoy being around people. I was never good at chatting up girls, ever, but that's something I had to learn. And that once it is integrated into your life, I've got a couple of girls that I'm dating, sort of longer term and romantically involved, but it's just that they're becoming difficult, basically. And the cure is not to delete them. The cure is to just rise above them, as it were, by opening my mind and my heart to other girls. So I'm messaging a girl on Tinder now, and I bumped into a girl in the metro, in the underground tunnels here, just an hour or so earlier. So. But, I haven't approached for a couple of weeks, and then before that I approached 3 girls in relative quick succession for me over a period of like 10 days. So you see the lesson here. Integrate it. It's not an opportunity cost to your life in terms of sacrifices you might have to make for other pursuits and endeavours, your job, side hustles, your family, whatever. It's not an opportunity cost. In fact, it's an opportunity profit. It's an opportunity bonus, because it energizes you if you're doing it naturally, just as you're normally going out about your normal day-to-day. That, for God's sake, that's the obvious end game, isn't it? Learn the stuff, integrate it into your life, be able to talk to an attractive girl anywhere, anytime. There are always exceptions, within reason, within limits. Yeah. Now, I think the other thing that why this is a bit of a weasel, it's all a bit weird, is actually because guys are soaked in social conditioned thinking, and inherited from family, friends, and from the society in which they're in. You know, I had a conversation with a friend who's not into this stuff, and his girlfriend, they're the same age, was like, we were talking about dating, and she was like, why don't you meet someone your own age, Alex? And you know, it's not like there's anything wrong with meeting someone your own age, but what's interesting is what she was projecting was it's odd for a guy to date a girl who's not his own age. Yeah, that's a socially conditioned trope that comes from the West, and it's only probably 50 years old. Yeah. Here in the East, the further east you go, it's a completely different mindset, and girls actually see an older, more established guy as someone who's more able to provide for them, deal with their play acting, deal with their eccentricities, be a man, be strong, yeah, because he knows who he is and he's got life experience. So you can see how, yeah. So these are the social conditioned things, and that's just one example of many social conditioned problems that guys have. And actually, oftentimes, particularly with it's a bit weird thing when it creeps in, all these, what really is going on is fear masquerading as sort of social considerations and rationalizations. Yeah. Now, what could be more manly and more inspiring than a guy who's prepared to challenge his assumptions about things? You know, whether it's ideas he's got about this, whether it's ideas he's got about religion, about the Ukraine war, about what Israel's doing, about you know, challenging his prejudices, not massaging his prejudices, but challenging his existing thinking, and just asking himself the question, have I really thought this through? Or do I just hold these opinions because they were on advertising hoarding, or on the television, or my friends were or my parents were talking into my ear? Have I actually ever have I got an original thought in my head? So at a bigger level, you can see it's sort of a pursuit of spiritual development and freedom from wrong thinking. Yeah, and certainly when, you know, the rubber hits the road with this stuff, you know, the sword hits the anvil, sparks fly, and my God, it does light up the stuff that's going on underneath. You know what I mean? I think the final thing I would say is, you know, when you are saying it's all a bit weird, what you're really saying is, as often as not, and this is probably an answer to a lot of the weasels that I'm going to go through in this Weasel 101 series, what you're really saying is, it's just too hard, I can't do it. Yeah. You see an attractive girl over there, and no. And then the rationalization comes in, it's a bit weird, and so on and so forth. I was out last week and the place was swamped with weird Nick Krauser lookalikes. Nothing against Nick Krauser, but you know, he was such an icon, wasn't he, that everybody likes to dress like him. And in fact, I'm probably showing my age, there are probably other icons who dress in certain ways. You know what I mean? And you link that memory, and then that becomes the weasel for not approaching a girl. Here's the truth, it's exactly the same for me. I often don't approach girls that I'm genuinely attracted to and weasel out. Today was an exception, a few weeks ago was an exception. Today was a splendid exception because I was just going from A to B in the evening, and it's interesting, I have to kind of almost trick my mind and say, well, look, Alex, no, I'm not going to do it. No, Alex, maybe not, but just have a little walk in that direction. and just stop and just think, you know, and then the skills kick in, you know, and off I go. But when I do, I'm going through this thicket of fears that it's going to crash and burn, that she's going to think I'm weird, that it is weird, and that she's looking too serious, she's too attractive, she's too young for me, she's not, you know, blah, 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 blah. All the fears come up to meet the resolution that you've made to go out. And one of the most beautiful things that Tom Traeger's ever taught me is that immortal phrase, crash the car. That often is my friend at these times, particularly where I haven't been, you know, doing it, and it's just something I'm doing during my day-to-day. And then you discover that all those fears are unfounded. Isn't that cool? And you know what? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true, isn't it? In sports as well, in other pursuits, in artistic endeavours, in you know, in your chosen profession, your vocation. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. A man does not give up or not give his energy and his focus to something and commit to something. He does not give up just because it is hard. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, sorry to hear about Johnny Berber from last week. And I guess, you know, we all do have our inner demons, don't we? And if you've got into this stuff, you may have inner demons, and this may be one way of processing inner demons, going on this crazy madcap adventure. But if you do, go for it, embrace it, throw yourself into it, but do keep a sense of perspective and proportion.